As of late, I'm sure you guys have noticed, a lot of current NBA players, even some former players, have started bashing the 1980s as well as 1990s. And one of the leaders of the anti-80s, anti-90s group is Gilbert Arenas, who of course is a former player. And I'm not really a fan of Gilbert for a couple of reasons. One being, most of his takes are horrendously bad, and two, he flat out lies about the 80s and 90s eras. And today, once again, as you could have guessed, he is back yet again talking about the 80s and 90s and how overrated they actually were.
80s people think like fouling was defense. I saw what happened when the prototype #1 came into the league, and you didn't know what to do with it, which was Grant Hill, a 2-guard, 3-guard who actually went left to right. Y'all didn't know what the was going on when he crossed over. Yeah, you had the guard, you had Tim Hardaway who had the Timmy cross. You never had a 2-3 that actually crossed that fast. And he was barbecuing, Pippen, Jordan, and Rodman with the crossover, and he couldn't shoot a lick.
So Gilbert right there said the 1980s and the defense was only hard fouling. Now, based off actual history watching the games, that is not true. If you watch the 80s, especially the 90s, the defense of course is more physical in the paint and on the perimeter. And to someone today, that defense may look like fouling, but back then, it wasn't. And of course you had teams like the Pistons who would hack you when you went to the paint. But league-wide, every defense wasn't like the Pistons, and acting like it was is rewriting history. As the better defensive teams, like the Cavaliers, the Knicks, the Bulls, those teams actually played physical defense that didn't cross nearly as many lines. Now, looking at Gilbert's second point, he said Grant Hill, the quote-unquote prototype 1, was killing 80s defense. First off, Grant Hill was drafted in 1994, and when he came to the NBA, he was not smoking Jordan, Rodman, or Pippen. How do I know that? Because looking at the stats, they paint a very different story. As in 95-98, Grant Hill met the Bulls 11 different times. In those 11 games, he averaged 21.5 points on 45.2% shooting. Out of 11 games, only once did he crack 30 points versus Pippen, Jordan, and Rodman as Bulls. And 6 times, he didn't score over 20 points. And the icing on the cake, Detroit in those games was a pitiful 1-10. I wouldn't say Grant Hill played awful, he still played pretty good, but saying he cooked Pippen, Rodman, Jordan, he was just crossing them up, dunking on them, showing them up, is completely inaccurate.
So if you couldn't deal with prototype 1, what makes you think you can deal with the 2010-20 prototype? You can't. The moves that they do now, you've never seen in your life. So you wouldn't be able to guard, and you didn't actually stop me. You just fouled me till I just wanted to give up. So it's like, no, you're not gonna be able to guard these guys.
I do find it pretty shocking Gilbert openly admits him being fouled repeatedly, having physical defense would make him give up and quit. Keep that in mind for later. But the one thing he did say that caught my eye was saying the 2010 prototype, like Kevin Durant, would destroy the 90s and the 80s. And look, KD, he would be fine in any era, he would get his points and be fantastic. But playing against physical defense and different rules, it would have been 100% tougher to score. As only last year in 2022, for a couple of weeks the NBA let up on the cheap foul calls and superstars were complaining left and right, like Trae Young, James Harden, and Dame Lillard. And looking at guys like Gary Payton, Jordan, Pippen, Michael Cooper, Dennis Rodman, even Joe Dumars, they would 100% be effective in today's NBA as defenders. Of course, they couldn't be as physical, but looking at the defense today, those players would be in the top tier of the best defenders. And this overall debate of defense in different eras, really, isn't about defensive skill, it's all about the rules. And more specifically, what the refs allow the offense to get away with, or what they allow defense not to do. As when it comes to Kevin Durant, the quote-unquote prototype who's unstoppable, last year versus Boston, against physical defensive wings, we saw him struggle mightily, averaging 26.3 points on 38.6% shooting, 33% from 3, with 5.3 turnovers. In Game 1, he shot 37.5%, Game 2, 23.5%, and in Game 4, 27.3%. Even looking at Kyrie Irving, who some would argue the most skilled guard ever, he was locked down in this series. As in Games 2 through 4, he averaged 15.3 points on 37% shooting, 18% from 3, with 2 turnovers, scoring 10 points, 16, and then 20. I want to be very clear in saying this, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are great offensive players who will be fantastic in any era. But looking at that series, versus big defensive wings who played physical, they struggled mightily. And if you think Boston's defense then was better than the Bulls in the 90s, you're out of your mind, as Tatum, Brown, and Horford aren't even comparable to MJ, Pippen, and Rodman.
Someone asked me, hey, can you stop the player today? Stop them? Fuck no. I'm not going to pretend that I can stop the next generation of players. I'm not guarding someone trying to score 30 every night. Offense is way better than it was. How you play defense has never changed, it's never evolved. So what has happened is, since offense has the blueprint, offense has evolved its game around the rules of defense.
Now, I want this to be clear, Gilbert in that clip was asked, could he stop today's players? That is a question of Gilbert and his own defensive ability, and him saying he couldn't guard these players isn't exactly breaking news. But looking at his actual points, he is so close to joining my side of the debate. As even he admits, offense today has evolved around the rules. That is my entire point I've made for years. The rules, and the rules alone, are why teams are scoring 140 points on any given Monday. And until the rules change, that will continue to happen into the 2030s. As back in the 90s, the rules were much different. As in the post, you were allowed to put your forearm in someone's back. In the post, that definitely matters. When it came to ball handlers, you could hand check them, guide them, and be physical with them on the perimeter. For a ball handler, that 100% matters. And when it came to big men, in the paint, there was no 3 seconds. For guards, centers, power forwards, a big camping in the paint changes everything. Once again proving the rules are the reason offenses are so good and so high-paced in today's league.
You gotta remember, we keep creating moves. We keep evolving the offense. The defense has no chance. It's not that the defense is worse, it's the offense is just that much better. If you grab today's players and you give them the same space Michael Jordan had, barbecue shrimp time.
Now, Gilbert right there took major shots at Jordan and his era, saying if stars from today played in MJ's space, it would be barbecue chicken. So let's think about this for 1 second and go about it logically. Gilbert Arenas in this video is on record saying offense today in 2023 has evolved around the rules, and defense, quote, has never evolved. If you acknowledge players today bend the offensive rules, you have to acknowledge the 1990s rules were indeed different. They changed the play style and the overall flow of an offensive player. And if you're playing in that era, hand checking, forearms in the post, 3 seconds, and rules like that would affect a player who's playing in 2023 and being transplanted to 1990. And off sheer numbers, looking at today's NBA, teams on average are scoring 114.7 points. For the entire 90s decade, The highest scoring year was 1990, where teams averaged 107 points per game. And the lowest year came 99, where it was 91.6. Off sheer numbers, players in this era playing in that era, their numbers would decrease based off pace as well as possessions.
Gil, your last player, John Stockton.
Yeah?
Serious? I'm asking you a question.
Oh man, like come on, like you go like hard, then like
We're
really
mixing
easy.
and matching.
Then you go like really easy.
But you want them all easy or all hard?
No, I'm just saying, like there was better names than that. Of course, he's getting his ass busted, bro. Come on, man. It's John Stockton.
Is he getting any buckets on
No,
you?
that pick and roll to the that don't. They gotta remember he gotta play one-on-one. You gotta try to score on me.
Now, I get Gilbert's trying to be funny, but looking at this segment, it really personifies the difference in players like Stockton and Gilbert, as Stockton was a player who played winning basketball, compared to Gilbert, who's a guy who just played basketball. As the first thing he went to off the bat was saying he'd beat Stockton in a one-on-one. John Stockton is not worried if you can beat him one-on-one, because basketball is a 5v5 sport where winning is the ultimate goal. And even worse than that, he says, quote, that pick and roll wouldn't work. First off, John Stockton was drafted in 1984, played in the 80s, 90s, and even 2000s. And unknown to most, he was an all-star at least once in every decade. And looking at 2002, in Gilbert's era, Karl Malone, age 39, averaged 22.4 points, 8.6 boards, and 4.3 assists, compared to Stockton, who at age 40 averaged 13.4 points, 8.2 assists, and 1.9 steals. Even with Stockton being 40 and Malone being 39, in 2002, their Jazz team made the playoffs, winning 47 games with a quote-unquote same old pick and roll that wouldn't work.
My rookie year, I think I gave him like 27 easy. Doop, doop, doop. Doop, doop, doop. None of that. I don't know what defense y'all was playing back then, but all that hand checking, that don't work when the kid is going downhill.
Was he talking shit to you, or did he just shut up after you?
That was all me right there.
Okay.
Come on, old man. Come on, old man. Yeah. Nah, that handshake don't work. I ain't trying to run the offense.
Now, Gilbert once again is half joking, but seriously is bragging about beating old Stockton, who is nearly 40. I mean, say what you want to say. If you think dropping 30 points on a 40-year-old is impressive, that's on you. But looking at the actual facts and looking at Gilbert's claims, they don't really align. As Gilbert Arenas, as a rookie, versus John Stockton, didn't score 30, didn't score 20, and barely cracked 15 points. As in his first game, he had a whopping 0, his second game, he had 6, and his third had 16. Gilbert Arenas versus John Stockton 3 times that year didn't outscore him once, as Stockton had 6 points to Gilbert's 0, 13 points to Gilbert's 6, and 26 to Gilbert's 16. And as you probably guessed, the Jazz in those games went 3-0. I think it's pretty clear at this point Gilbert Arenas has an agenda against the 1990s as well as 80s. And when it comes to those eras, he'll lie, exaggerate, and even contradict his own points from previous clips. So, as always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.